calculation in there. I think they had 300, if I'm not mistaken, and it's based on actual. And the study is done by, I can't think of the man's name, but he does all the calculations for us. What's it? Frank Magraviti, I believe is his name.
Frank.
I can provide that to you if you're interested.
And remember, this is commercial. Again.
Yeah. It's just to do the connection fee, the division, and the average that we use here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, it's homes.
Come on. But
It's, well, the whole thing is for homes and commercial. But that particular part.
You see no one else come forward?
A motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 2018:03.
Grignani, second.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and a hearing held thereon. Now therefore it be resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading and that the notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution?
Second.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Ordinance 2018:4, bond ordinance, providing for the upgrade and replacement of generators at the sewer sewer utility in and by the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills in the County of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $4 million, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $4 million bonds or notes of the Township to finance the cost thereof. The notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, on April the 17th, 2018. This ordinance was introduced at the April 3rd, 2018 agenda meeting. Motion to accept the ordinance 2018:4 be heard in its second and final reading by title only.
Second.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Public hearing 2018:04. Motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 2018:04 by myself.
Second?
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Bob Venezia, 102 Brooklawn Drive. This ordinance should be rejected. The whole purpose of having surpluses in your sewer utility is to pay for big-ticket items like this. If you have over the actuarial recommended amount in your surplus, that amount should be applied to buy these generators and not bonding for it. And absolutely, you should not be transferring money from the sewer to the general budget and then bonding behind it in this, in the sewer. The $2 million that you're of the surplus that you move to the general budget should be used to reduce this bonding amount. And by moving it to the general budget, what you're doing an end run around the 2% cap. That's what you're doing. And it's wrong. I mean, this is the same. This was the kind of accounting gimmick that the previous administration did that I thought would stop with a new administration, and it hasn't. So, it should be rejected. Thank you.
Okay, see no one else come forward?
Motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 2018:04 by myself.
Second.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and a hearing held thereon. Now therefore be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading and that a notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution above by myself.
Second.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Crognani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Before I vote, Business Administrator, can you explain to me how Mr. Venezia's point is not what we should be considering? Well, first of all, remember that it's not just our people that utilize the sewer. We have 4 other municipalities that pay us money. So what we're doing is, some we're doing pay-as-you-go. We're being very conservative and not fully funding. If you take money, cash, now, continuing, we told you in that budget there is pay-as-you-go. But if we take another $4 million pay-as-you-go, you're going to find yourself that you're not going to regenerate it. You're going to find yourself in some difficulty. So what it is, it's a balance. There's a balance. We are doing pay-as-you-go. We are canceling other authorizations to spend. This would have been a wash because, unfortunately, because of our fiduciary responsibility when we investigated the old ordinance that did mention this, but it didn't mention it in the proper light, it was canceled, and then we had to put up a new ordinance. So, yes, what he says, if you're just looking here, you have to, in order to take care of what's 73 million and how much is our utilities. What are we looking at? 110 million dollars, and it's a balancing thing, and we're lucky that we have worked with other shared services, and we're bringing them in, and we're maintaining our plant. And again, one of the other things you don't do is you don't use all your cash, because then what you're doing is you live here only for 5 years. So you didn't get the benefit. You paid out of that, the utilities paid out of that. In 5 years, you paid the full amount. Whereas when you do some of the bonding, you spread it over 20, 30, 40 years on a sewer thing. Now, Ann made a point too. She was just showing me right now, it's not a simple straight line answer. The thing is, the plant was brand new when, roughly? It was
1960.
1960, and then when did they do the upgrade? It had to be
1999, I thought we started it. Yeah.
Okay.
We
The
started
big-
the upgrade in 1999.
Well, I'm not pointing fingers, but the management and the upkeep of a brand new system was let go. So there's a lot of investment that needs to be put back in. So what we're trying to do with our only 3.5 years here, 3 years, 4 years, is set it straight, balance it out. We're asking you to give us faith in somebody that has many years in utility, It's a balancing act. We will be able to and have reduced, as I said, we were at $11 million. So we did use, that's why we're down to $9 million. We did pay as you go. So in a short period of time, the people that lived here for that short period of time, they paid for that. So what you do is you also say, okay, on this one, we're going to say spread it out over 20, 25 years. So that's the answer to that.
Can I explain it a little easier to the
I'm
Boy
sorry.
Scout here who's
Okay, I'm
looking,
sorry.
trying to follow you and he's getting glassy
I
eyed?
know, I'm sorry.
Okay, let's take something very simple. A road, okay? The life of a road is approximately 20 years. So if we had to repave or rebuild a road for, let's say, $10 million, we could, if we use current expense, that means we have to pay the whole amount this year. That means your dad pays a big amount of money, okay, to pay for that road this year, okay? Someone who moves in next year pays nothing because your dad paid for that whole road. So the advantage to spreading it out over the 20-year life of the road is everybody who lives here and benefits from the road gets to pay a portion of the road. So it's fair. The other thing that's important is we have a very, very good bond rating, and so our interest rate is very, very low. Another reason to bond. Make more sense?
Yeah, it spreads it out, Thank you both for the explanation, and with that, I will vote yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes. Okay, Mrs. DePiero?
Ordinance 2018:05. Bond ordinance providing for the various road and sidewalk improvements in and by the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills in the County of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $3,020,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $2,869,000 bonds or notes of the township to finance part of the cost thereof. Notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, on April 17, 2018. This ordinance was introduced at the April 13, 2018 agenda meeting. Motion to accept the above ordinance.
Second, Grignani.
Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani.
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Motion to open the public hearing on this ordinance.
Second.
Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani.
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes. See no one come forward?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second, Grignani.
Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani.
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and the hearing held thereon, now therefore be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading, and that a notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second, Grignani.
Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani.
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Non-consent agenda. Resolution 2018-82. Resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills awarding a contract to Revax Contracting, 356 Thomas Street, Newark, New Jersey, 07114 for improvements to Old Bloomfield Avenue for a total base bid sum of item number 1-50 and alternative A1 price $647,427. Motion to approve.
Second?
Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani.
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Resolution 2018-083, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills authorizing the Township of Denville to have sole authority to assess and collect taxes for the property identified as Block 6, Lot 12.01. Motion to approve the resolution by myself. Second?
Grignani.
Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani.
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Don't know why we're doing that though.
Resolution 2018-084. Resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills authorizing the award of contract and a competitive basis for clubhouse operation and management services at the Knoll Country Club to Kemper Sports Management Incorporated. Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Oh.
Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Mrs. Cragnani.
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes. Mrs. DePiero?
Resolution
You know what,
2018.
you know what, could you just bask for 5 seconds? Let's bask for a minute. We don't bask enough, you know what I mean, in the sunlight? Don't look at me like that, she's lost it.
Excuse me?
No,
For Kemper Sports?
yeah, not for Kemper Sports, for the fact that this is a big deal. This
Ye-
didn't
yes,
just
it is.
happen.
Yes, it is.
Everybody worked, there was pull and yin and yang on it, and it didn't just happen. And congratulations, we maybe came to some terms together, so, good job, guys, good job.
Well,
good
not only
job,
that, but
good
we
job.
should, we should thank Ann
Yeah.
Cucci because she
Yes.
did yeoman's portion of the work to make
Yes.
this happen.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Ann.
And he's no slouch out there either. Kevin.
And
the
Kevin
teacher.
back there was
That's
good,
right.
was doing a
Thank
good
you,
job
Kevin.
too.
Job. Right, right.
Okay. Enough
Thank
basking.
you.
Let's go.
That's the basket's over.
I was gonna say, are we finished basking?
No basking, no
All right,
basking.
back to work.
Thank you.
Resolution 2018-085. resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills approving settlement in Wildlife Preserves, Inc. versus Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills et al. Docket number MRSL 2704-16. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second, Grignani.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Crognani,
Begrudgingly.
Mrs. McCarthy,
It's
Yes.
good.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
I'm gonna bask myself, thank you. This should have been settled last year, so I'm very happy it got settled this year. Thank you, you can bask, Diane, and you
I'm
can tell
basking,
Jim.
don't worry.
Tell
Thank you.
Jim to bask.
I'll let him know.
Yeah, right.
I'll let him know. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President, I'm gonna be quiet now.
Okay.
R 2018-086, resolution authorizing grant applications for the New Jersey Historic Preserve, New Jersey Historic Preservation Fund. Motion to approve?
Second.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Crognani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Resolution 2018-87, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills confirming the appointment and authorizing the award of a contract for professional services with McCurdy, Riskin, Olson, and Delapalli, PC, as special legal counsel in connection with tax appeal matter. Motion to approve the resolution.
Second?
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Crognani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes.
Consent agenda. Be it resolved, all items listed with an asterisk are routine and non-controversial by the Township Council and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Motion to approve the consent agenda by myself.
Second.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Crognani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes. This time I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
So moved.
Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Mrs. Crognani,
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Karifi.
Yes. Good night, everyone.
Good night, thank you.
Good night. Leslie, this goes back.
Ellen?